We'll see chat.
Hello, everybody, and welcome in. I've got LambNRice here, and I am so excited to have him. We're very fortunate to get to spend some time this evening with him. So welcome in, man. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, dude.
So give us just the super surface level like elevator pitch. Who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so my handle is LambNRice. I think those in the community probably, if you've seen my stream, I'm a Zerg player. I've been streaming for a couple of years now, just shy of 3 years, and been playing a lot of Starcraft 2 on stream. I play at about a Masters 1-ish, 1 to 2 level, depending on where you catch me. Um, And yeah, streaming's been awesome. Been playing StarCraft for over 10 years since the beta release, and yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, man, awesome. Well, looking forward to that LambNRice third year anniversary stream for sure. So you started then with SC2, or did you ever dabble in Brood War at all?
I played Brood War way back when, never competitively. I think like a lot of people who play StarCraft 2 competitively, they may have touched it.
Yep.
I played a lot of Brood War with my friends, do like big game hunters, like infinite money maps, try to get like a million carriers, go a move to victory type.
Right.
Um, but like I'd never gotten into the competitive scene. And it's funny because like after I'd gotten into StarCraft 2 and like tried to be a little bit more competitive and play harder, I remember going back and watching like some of the Brood War stuff and being like, holy crap, like I feel like I missed out because like I didn't get to
Ah,
see all the cool stuff that was happening in the Brood War scene. I didn't realize like how competitive like it was.
totally. Yeah.
Um, so it was just like a cool uh kind of I guess Easter egg for me. I didn't know that stuff existed
Hmm.
until I'd gotten into like the competitive SC2 scene.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of have that same thing both with Brood War and also like everything that happened before like the middle of HOTS. Because all of that is just like before my time, right? I'm like, oh damn, like I've heard these stories and I've seen clips and stuff, but you weren't there for it. It's like a different kind of
Hmm.
a thing.
Hmm.
Um, So when you started with StarCraft 2, right? It sounds like, pretty much right at the beginning. Did you start in kind of like a competitive try hard kind of a mindset, or did it evolve into that over time?
It definitely evolved into that over time. Like I never had the idea of, hey, I'm going to play this. I'm going to try to be good, and let's see how far I can take it. And like, I started playing StarCraft 2. Me and my friends actually. This is funny. The night it came out, we were lined up at like midnight in Manhattan at the GameStop on 32nd Street. There was a line, and you had to have pre-ordered the game.
Yeah.
So like me and two of my buddies, I think we were just waiting out there in the cold, and we're just like StarCraft 2. This is gonna be freaking awesome. Pick up the game. We all go home. We're like installing the game and like getting really excited. But yeah, to answer your question, like no, I never thought like, hey, competitive level is something I could ever touch. In my mind, I was like, hey, and this is still true. Like the guys who were like at the top, untouchable, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
inconceivable that I could even scratch the surface on like how good these guys were. Um, and yeah, I just started playing the game, and you know, I'm like kind of an obsessive personality. So like when I pick something up, I want to do it a lot.
Yeah.
And it kind of manifested itself into like I became decent at the game. I wouldn't call myself good. I don't think anyone who plays this game calls himself good, but I definitely became like better than I thought
Hmm.
I would be.
Yeah. Interesting. So was there like a particular point where you kind of hit that like inflection of okay, I didn't think I would get, to this level of skill. Like, even if you still don't consider it good, right? Like, was there a distinct moment where you remember hitting it and being like, huh, I never thought that I would be able to do the stuff that I'm doing or anything like that?
Is there any moment? Um, hmm. I think when they had like their matchmaking and rank system come out, and then you get to see where you land, and then you get matched up with players who, hey, in your mind, you're like, hey, they're matching me up with people who are like relatively around the same skill
Mm,
set.
yeah.
And then I would hit people. I'm like, oh, I know that name. I've seen you on YouTube, or I've like watched tournaments where you're playing, and like, I would win some games, lose some games, and think like, oh, huh. like maybe the skill difference isn't as great as I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my mind, I'm like, hey, maybe I'm like 50th percentile of this game. And then the matchmaking system told me, hey, like you're actually better than that. Like
Yeah.
here's where you stand. And you're like, you found what was interesting to me was I thought in my mind, it's like, hey, the perception of the pro player is they literally never make mistakes.
Yep.
And so much of that is actually untrue.
Mm-hmm.
In unless you're Cyril, like everyone's making mistakes when they play this game.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like a really like interesting kind of revelation for me.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, right? Like you kind of pointed out earlier that like most people kind of have the, oh, I'm bad, like that nobody really claims to be good at the game. And it's like, it's funny that there's that sort of duality between how people feel and the sort of self-critical angle, right? And then also we like enshrine pro players and we go, oh, but they don't make mistakes though, right? It's like,
Mhm.
but even they themselves will kind of mostly have this self-critical attitude for the the vast majority. It's not everybody, and I think that's really just due to like skill ceiling, right? And I think about you sort of doing the self-assessment, being like, oh, I'm probably in the 50th percentile. I'm like, holy shit, man, you're so much better than me, right? Like that. And like I've looked and I'm aware of like what percentile mid diamond is, right? And so like for you to tell me that that was sort of your self-assessment is like, oh man, kind of wild.
I think it's kind of like you don't know what's out there, right?
Yeah.
And like when you were like eh, playing competitive games even before that, like playing Brood War or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
there's no official rating for you to really know
Ah.
where you stand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the game hasn't told me, or like the world hasn't told me, this is where you are,
Right.
right? Starcraft 2 debuted a pretty damn good matchmaking system. And
Mm-hmm.
oh hey, by the way, there's a huge player pool. It'll peg you pretty well to where like you stand. So
Yep.
um that was like it was a really interesting thing for me to find out. It's like, oh, actually we're making a lot of mistakes and everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out how to win despite those mistakes is kind of like the fun in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool to see like where where my skill set kind of landed me and gotten to like actually climb and like play good players and take some games here and there is like kind of an interesting like moment for me throughout like my StarCraft life.
Yeah, totally, man. That's like I feel like that's one of the most hype things is you see a name and you're like, I know this person, right? Like, is there anybody you remember in particular where like, even if maybe like you went 1-10 against them or whatever, but is there anybody who
Mhm.
stands out where like when you got that kill, you're just like, oh yeah, like I'm in it now.
Oh man, I think the GM gold border and just like beating somebody who has that,
Uh-huh.
you get that feeling. Like a couple of names I've taken games off. I don't want to like blow up their spot, but and they've definitely all beaten me more times than I've beaten them. So I don't want to
Sure,
like
yeah.
toot my own horn, but like I've taken games off guys like Cats, like Vibe, like I've never beaten Vibe Zerg, so like I've like
Mm,
beaten his off race.
yeah.
Um, who else? Neuro. I've
Mm-hmm.
played a bunch on Lander. Uh, um, I have a couple of like tournament wins against some good players.
Uh-huh.
Um, which we can get into if you're interested. But like I've
Yeah,
played
yeah,
guys like
totally.
Rob and Soul, and this is a throwback, but like I think my StarCraft 2 claim to fame came when I played this guy. I think he played for Root. His name was Root Doro. He was like a Korean pro
Mm-hmm.
that I played in MLG Providence. I think it was like 2011. It was a really long time ago.
Wow, yeah.
Um, and then it was like considered like a big upset in the tournament. That like because Root was like a top 16 or top 8 like finalist of the previous MLG,
Mm-hmm.
and I had met him in the open bracket, and I was already like, okay, this is going to be fine. I'll get some experience. It'll be fun. It'll be a
Yeah.
cool like haha story. We'll go out and have some beers after, and then that'll be that. And then I ended up beating him 2-1 in a
Oh
best of
man.
3 series, um, which was like holy shit,
Yeah.
like that's crazy. Like I'll never harness or capture this like moment again in like StarCraft. And quite frankly, I really haven't. Like I probably was playing like out of my mind that day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of cool to like have been playing the game and like you put in a lot of hours and you actually get to measure yourself against some good players. That didn't really exist in Brood War, at
Mm.
least as easily as it is in StarCraft 2.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. It's really interesting, right? I feel like I always put people on the spot with this question, but it's like it's too fun not to go there, right? Like, and I don't know. I think any of these people that you mentioned, right? Like, almost especially the list of people that you mentioned, like they get it, right? They get that like even just matching up against them is exciting, And even if, yeah, like, I mean, for me, dude, if I go 1 out of 100 games against any of
Yeah.
those people, I'm stoked. Like, that's
Yeah.
awesome for me. Yeah, very cool.
And
So,
let me not even send the wrong message. Like these guys, like they're much better than I am. Like I probably played the best games of my entire life against them, and they probably were playing like below average level in that moment, right?
mm-hmm,
So like
mm-hmm,
thinking about how lucky it is catching lightning in a bottle, like that happened.
mm-hmm,
And then
yeah,
there's countless other stories of me playing like games against much better guys that I'll just forget about because hey, they were playing average and I was playing average, and there's
mm-hmm,
no way my average beats their average. Like
right, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
players out there are just so freaking good.
Yeah, we want to push those ones out of mind as fast as we can, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
okay, something that I didn't realize though, that I realized as you were telling that story is like you've been pretty good for a while, actually. Like you've been do you actually like I guess I should have looked this up beforehand. Like, do you have kind of a memory of what your progression has been? Like at around what year have you hit what point?
Mm.
Guess I could pull this up while we talk even.
Yeah, there's probably some data on it out there somewhere, but it's funny. The answer is like I don't think I've seen as much progression as like, there's so many stories of guys like who have like, hey, I came up on from platinum and
Mm-hmm.
here I am pushing like top 50 GM. Like I don't have that story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, since I picked up the game and since they released like the ranking system, I think I started out in like the highest rank the game started with. It's like
Yep.
in the beginning there was like diamond and that was like the top
Mm-hmm.
rank, and like I had gotten to diamond and then they released masters and then at grandmasters I'd only gotten into GM once, but like masters I've pretty much sat at like I guess ever since they released the MMR system somewhere around like the high 4K 5K level.
Mm-hmm.
um so like tracking the progression, honestly I don't think I've improved that much.
Mm.
There's probably like times throughout the last 10 years where it's like here's where I was really good, here's where I took some time off, or here's where I was bad.
Right. Yeah,
um
yeah.
but I think my claim to fame and like the way I play is like mechanically I feel like I like pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
um like the hands move okay and I think I know what I'm looking for, and like you hear certain players talk about this a lot, like the rhythm of like your macro
Mm-hmm.
cycle of inject,
Yeah.
inject, inject, creep tumor, creep tumor, creep tumor, build stuff, build stuff, build stuff, overload, overload. Like the, I guess if it's like a drum set, you're just hitting all of the different
Uh-huh.
parts of the drum in the right order.
Yeah.
Um, I've been lucky enough to be playing the game as long as I have that, I have kind of that rhythm. Like I can get on my bike and just start riding. Um, I'm really not great at like thinking about the game
Mm.
and like problem solving in creative ways that I feel like a lot of other players really excel at.
Interesting, huh?
So like I've kind of been like a do this and do that and try to do it really well. Like anyone who's watched my stream knows it's like, hey, you're the muta guy. All you do is build mutas, and like largely in part that's true. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like what's this saying? It's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
Right,
and
yeah.
that's just kind of the way I play the game.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, it's I've had a lot of satisfaction doing that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like I love doing interviews with people that have something that kind of iconic about them, right? Because it's just like I don't know. This is like I feel like I have such like nerd fanboy energy when I say stuff like this, but like it's true, right? It's like it's just so fun to me, right? Like I know when I tune into your stream, I'm getting something unique and special, right? I'm kind of curious, like, where did the love affair with the Mutalisk begin? How far
Um,
back do you and the Muta go?
it, I since I picked up the game, I think
Uh huh.
like there's something about it, and maybe this is like the love affair with like ZVT is the matchup where I think mutas stand out the most. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
the one where you can do it and you can probably make it work in most scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in Wings of Liberty, there was a really like elegant kind of dance in ZVT
Mm-hmm.
where, and this is pre Widowmine, this is pre Vipers and some of the new stuff, but it was like Marine, Tank, Medevac, Muta, Ling, Bane.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like it would make like a really great movie poster where they're all like facing each
Yeah, yeah,
other.
yeah.
And there's just this elegant dance that kind of goes back and forth. And it wasn't a thinking man's game. It
Mm.
was a who does their thing better game,
Uh-huh.
right? Um, and I loved that. Like I loved the hey, they're stronger in a straight up fight. I'm stronger in like a mobile dance around you, pick off stray units kind of fight.
Mhm.
And like to me, it was like a really fun way of playing the game. Like
Yeah, yeah.
if you
So
think about sorry to cut you off, like
no, no.
boxing analogy, like
Yeah.
martial arts analogy, which I'm really into, but like if you have a fighter who's really good in the pocket and they just kind of sit there and say, hey, let's slug it out. And then you have a guy who dances around and kind of picks their shots and moves and sticks and kind of jabs and dances that like that interaction, like they say in fighting, like styles make fights. And I think like the
Ah.
ZVT, like Marine, tank, medevac against Mutilating Bane is exactly that. It's just like this really cool, um, kind of elegant interaction.
Yeah, yeah, I love it, man. Very cool. So you kind of said it's not like it's not a thinking person's fight, and I love that characterization of it, right? So the idea of like, we're just here like brawling, right? And
Mhm.
like brawling with different styles even. That to me kind of stood out when you said it in terms of, you described yourself as a player at like a very kind of high level, right? And you said, maybe I don't have sort of the decision making or like strategic pieces that, maybe you admire in other people, but you're very good at these kind of rhythm based, like intuitive, I'm just doing my thing kind of a play style. Do you feel like you picked mutas because that was kind of your natural skill set or how you like to play? Or was it the other way around? Did you become that player because of the way the unit works?
Hmm. I don't know. That's my quick answer. Like I can make
Yeah,
something
yeah.
up and say, oh, it was this or that. It's a really good question. I think so. I think when the game came out and like when I started to first watch like the pro casts and like GSL or like
Hmm.
I think there was like a King of the Beta tournament that like Artosis casted or something like that. I think a lot of it comes from imitation.
Mm.
Like I think it was seeing someone do something and then thinking, "Holy shit, that works really well when
Yeah.
used correctly." And then on the polar opposite of that is, "Holy shit, that's terrible when used improperly."
Yep, yep.
Right? Um, I guess I just described all of Starcraft too, but like that to me was like, oh, I want to do that because
Mhm,
I want to like dance on the razor's edge and be like, hey, it's going to be something really awesome, or maybe I'll fall flat on my face. But if
mhm,
I do
mhm.
it really, really well,
Right.
like it's the most OP thing, or it's like unstoppable. So
Mhm,
I don't know if like where the love affair started. Like I can't point to a game or anything, but like
mhm,
I found myself always gravitating towards the players that play that style. So
mhm,
like I love DRG. I love if you remember Lenok, he was
mhm.
a
Yeah.
Muta Zerg player. Like watching those guys play that way, like those are my favorites, like without a doubt.
Nice, man. So, okay, so you're watching guys like DRG, guys like Lenok, and you're basically saying, I like some of these styles that I'm seeing in some of these games, and I want to kind of play like that. Is that sort of like it sounds like at least a piece of the origin story?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes from like an admiration of like, holy shit, how do these guys do that with this?
Uh-huh.
And I want to try to do that, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So,
Like
okay.
I can't like sit on my soapbox and say, "Oh, I created this," or "I mastered it," or "I made it better than anyone else." Like
Mhm.
in my mind, I'm like, I'm hopeful. Like, hey, if I can emulate some of the cool stuff that I see these guys do, like, what is that going to look like? And can I do that? Like, can I
Mhm.
manifest that into my playstyle?
Yeah, it's so cool. Like I remember there's an old Day 9 Daily, right, where one of the pieces of advice, one of the many pieces of advice he gives is like, have a hero, right? Or multiple heroes where it's like, I think this player's cool. I saw them do this thing in game 3 of this series in GSL and it just changed my life and I want to be like that. And it's really, really neat to see like, I mean, you've made this work through like so many different metas too, right? Where it's just like, yeah, no, I like this. I have a large investment of skill in this and I think I can be even better at it than I am right now, and I'm gonna keep working on it. And like I love like I guess okay, when I look at you as a streamer too, not just as a player, right? And I see like because people there's always guy in chat who wants to come by and explain to you that going mutas in this particular situation was wrong, streamer, and why did you do that? So for you to kind of stick to your guns in that way and be like, yeah, no, I'm playing the game that I like. I'm refining the skills that I want to refine. Like I've always really admired that about you, and I wish I was as good like having those conversations as you are, right? Like and I don't know, like is that a talent thing? Is that practice? Did you have to work at that?
Um, I think at the level that I play, right, it's not the
Mm-hmm.
top, right? We're
Mm,
we're somewhere up there in Masters, but it's not like, hey, I'm gonna go win, you know, a GSL playing this way. Like,
mm-hmm.
let's be real. And if I were to actually try to do that, probably would need to adapt and adjust my style.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way I approach the game is, hey, I'm gonna do the thing that I'm really good at, that I'm comfortable in, and it's like kind of the interaction. I'll use another sports analogy. It's kind of the interaction of like in baseball, the pitcher's the one dictating the pace. He says,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Now it's your problem," right? Um, and the batter has to decide how they respond to that. Like that, and that's that. But no matter what, like they're still at the mercy of the thing that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've kind of like looked at like the way that I play the game that way. Like I'm gonna do the thing, and I do it pretty well. Um, some players are gonna beat it, right?
Yeah.
Hey, there's a 10 player, they're really good at like mech. Mech in theory
Mm,
defeats like muta based play,
mm-hmm.
but only in a certain number of conditions. Like if I screw up, absolutely I'm gonna lose.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they play excellent and I play excellent, chances are they get a slight advantage. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not much.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe like a 55%, 45% kind of
Mm,
edge. Like I don't
yeah.
look at it as, hey, it's black and white, like heads beats tails or,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
rock beats scissor. Like it's not really that game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know. That's kind of the way I've played it. The guy in chat will always come by. He's like, nobody makes mutas against Thors. That's a really bad idea. And then when I win those games, guy in chat either disappears or like their reasoning, right? Their brain goes somewhere else, and they're like, "Hey, like you only won that because," and then here's a list of like,
Right.
"Oh, his positioning was wrong," or he didn't base trade effectively, and like they're theory crafting with you, and they're saying, "Hey, under perfect circumstances, like you should lose that game 100 out
Mm-hmm.
of 100." And I'm like, "Look, like that's not what this game is." And if you think Starcraft is a game of like perfect conditions, like
Right.
you're watching the wrong thing. So
Right. Right.
it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me so much. I think when like you get those critiques,
Mm-hmm.
it's part of me is like I see it in chat. I'm like, okay, we'll see. Sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Getting fueled by it a little bit. I love
Dude,
it.
it's awesome. It's great.
So,
I don't
all
even
right.
mind the backseat gaming, by the way. People come in and they just start, hey, do this or do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it's a decent suggestion, but I'm gonna try this, or maybe
Mm.
I will take this suggestion. Be like, hey, here's where I think it's wrong, or like here's what I think goes really well with that. But
Right. Yeah.
um, yeah, like uh, it's always a fun interaction, I think, and that's part of like the joy of streaming, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna happen, and like you kind of roll with it.
Yeah, I mean the rolling with it though, that's the part that I feel like you've got kind of something special there because you do it better than like almost anybody. Where it's like, guy in the chat is driving me as your friend and viewer absolutely out of my mind, right? But you're just fine and it's like kind of weird to me cuz like I'll be nice, right? But like secretly I'm annoyed sometimes, you know
Mhm,
what I mean? Like
mhm.
and sometimes not so secretly, right? Like I've been known to throw a person or two out of chat for for their behavior. But yeah, I feel like you do it so effortlessly. Before I lose this thought though, you kind of mentioned playing on like that razor's edge, right? Where you're like, I like this
Mhm.
strategy that's like really like finessey and like if I do it right, like I just look so cool, and if I do it wrong, I'm gonna get wrecked, right?
Mhm.
And it made me wonder, do you so I don't know how extensively you do or have in the past played other games, but I'm kind of curious if you do play a lot of other games, either video games or tabletop or anything. Um, do you gravitate towards that kind of a style in everything, or is this a StarCraft thing?
I kind of I like the oh, nobody picks that character. Oh, I'm gonna try him.
Ah,
I
yeah.
gotta I gotta know why that's the
Uh-huh.
case, and that's the way I like to learn the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? I used to play a ton of Super Smash Brothers Melee
Mm-hmm.
in college. Like me and my roommates. I mean, it probably cost me like a full point on my GPA because of how much we played that game.
Wow.
Um, And I always like the characters are like, oh, this guy's terrible. Don't play him. All right, let me
Mm-hmm.
give him a shot.
Yeah.
Um, like if I can be successful handicapping myself, like, oh, like could this be like? And I think this is part of probably like a bigger conversation, right? Where it's like I would rather show cool stuff
Mm.
than win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I learned that about myself like through the years of playing StarCraft because part of me was like, I'm not going to win GSL. Like, let's be
Mm.
real. There are people out there who are way more talented, way harder working, have better conditions to get better. My interest level isn't as high as it is with
Mm-hmm.
like some of those top guys. Like, I'm being realistic with myself, but like, is there something cool or creative that I can try to do in this game?
Mm-hmm.
And selfishly, like, I get a lot of satisfaction doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that's kind of like how I guess I gravitated towards like a style that's unpopular. People call
Mm-hmm.
it bad. You don't have enough drones, or nobody makes mutas, or how can you hold that off with only like things like that. I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like trying to figure out ways to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So cool, man. Was there something in particular that made you gravitate towards Zerg?
I think when beta came out, I think I played a bunch of Terran,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would just get like a million barracks and build bio and just a move and then win, um, or lose, right? Because that happens in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was something about like the macro cycles of Zerg that I really
Yeah.
enjoyed. Um, I talked a little bit about like the rhythm of it before. I think that's some of it, but I also think like this is a really stupid reason that I like it, but it was something as simple as like, hey, I can build overlords without grabbing a worker, doing a thing,
Mm.
queuing the worker back. That to me was annoying. Like I
Yeah.
hated
Uh-huh.
that. I was like, I don't want to do that.
I hate
Like
that too. Yeah.
even if you can queue it up, like I just don't want to do that. And I'm like, what if like if you can just do all of that with one hand, right? With the Zerg, you can do that
Mm-hmm.
and select all hatcheries,
Yeah.
larva, overlord, overlord, overlord. You can just kind of forget about it. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, like that felt really natural and nice and like allowed me to focus on some of the other cool stuff that
Mm-hmm.
Zerg can do. Um, I think that and like banelings were really cool. Like they're like you got to remember like when StarCraft 2 first came out, the graphics of that game were so much better than Brood War. And you're just like,
Yeah.
wow, this is like visually just like a pleasure to watch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like banelings were one of those units. I'm like, wow, that looks really freaking cool. Like
Yeah.
I want to play this race. Um, so yeah, I don't have like a cool backstory around like choosing Zerg, but like if I had to pick some reasons, like those are probably the ones.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's so funny you mentioned the graphics. Like my earliest memory of StarCraft 2, my college girlfriend got into the beta before me. And I went over
Uh-huh.
to her house. She had like one of those gamer laptops that you get when you're in college. You want to,
Yeah, yeah.
and I remember playing it. And I
They're
had,
like this big,
yeah,
right? They
yeah,
just
yeah, or
yeah,
like
they
big
heat up the
lights
whole
and shit.
room.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I hadn't touched Brood War since I was a kid. So it's, like 10 years or something had gone by between the last time I played StarCraft and when I played, the beta.
Yeah.
And I shit you not, I looked at it, and the way StarCraft 2 looked was how in my mind's eye Brood War looked. I was like, oh yeah, cool, it's the same game. Like I didn't have that thing that you're talking about where you're like, oh, it's so much better. I was like, yeah, okay, that's an assimilator. I remember that's what an assimilator looks like. Like, yeah, it looks good. And it looked good before. And like I
Yeah.
didn't go back and do the comparisons. So it's this like really funny kind of skewed memory that I have about it. But
That's
yeah.
like it's like when you think of like if you ever played GoldenEye as a kid on like
Mm-hmm.
N64 and you're like, oh, these graphics are freaking awesome,
Yep.
man. Like everything is so realistic. And then like you pull up images of it now, you're like, Jesus Christ, that thing is just like it looks like comparing a live action movie to like South Park. You're like, this is
Mm-hmm.
just like totally it shouldn't be a video game. Take
Yep.
that away.
Yep.
But I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like I tell that story just to underscore like exactly how much better it is, right? By talking about, me not really knowing it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
okay, so I'm throwing a lot at you here, kind of like, and I know I'm going all over the place, but you mentioned sort of like physical fighting, right? Like martial
Hmm.
arts. And you said, there's some tie-ins there, and I'm really really curious. Like, I'm probably going to deep dive this, but what kind of comes to mind just initially when I surface that subject for you?
So I don't know where I'm going with this. So I'll just
Yeah,
start
yeah.
talking and we'll see where it
Let's
takes us.
go.
I love like martial arts. I'm a big fan of like watching UFC,
Hmm.
watching boxing. I'm not a violent person by any means, but there's something really cool about participating in a competitive thing with massive consequence to being bad at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it really makes you think long and hard about like the decisions that you're going to make when you're competing.
Yeah.
And I've done some competing. Like I grew up, doing taekwondo as a kid. My
Hmm.
parents are Korean. I'm Korean, and taekwondo was like a big thing. Um, and I spent a lot of years like doing boxing. I started to dabble in jujitsu, and then COVID hit. So like it's always been like part of my DNA of like, hey, I really love like combat sports and the
Hmm.
interactions that people have, and the people that are part of those communities are really freaking cool too.
Hmm.
Um, but like the actual act of being in combat with somebody demands a lot from you really looking at yourself and being like, okay, well, let's not lie to ourselves in this environment because if you do, you're going to get hurt for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it one of my friends described it earlier like this is the most honest thing a person can do
Mm.
because there's no lying. Like you can't tell yourself, "Oh, I was great," or
Hmm.
"Oh, you can't make the this thing's imbalanced excuses that we love in Starcraft," or
Right.
like this is OP, or that guy did a build that's stupid. Like there's none of that in combat. Like in that it is, hey, let's be really critical about what we're doing and our choices and be honest about like how hard we're working to like get the results that we want. So
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
that to me is like one of the really beautiful things about it. And I
Yeah.
also think like it's really awesome to watch like some of the really incredible people in those crafts like
Hmm.
express themselves. And this
Yeah.
is where I think like the creativity and like the artistic part of you never think about like combat sports really like in the same realm as like art,
Hmm.
but it maybe you do. It's kind of like you get to watch people express things that really they're not able to communicate by just like verbally saying,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's like I don't understand it enough nearly to describe it well, but like
Yeah.
my friend calls it, he's like, hey, these guys are poets too,
Mm.
just with their hands and their feet, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
Um, you'll have some like combat sports people who are just like, that guy's really strong and scary and he just punches really hard. Like there is that type of
Yeah. Yeah.
fighter
Yeah.
too. But
Yeah.
then there is also like the maestro, like the guy
Hmm.
who's really commanding the space and like thinking about what you're doing and what he's doing and presenting problems to his opponent and
Hmm.
judging their response or baiting or like you know introducing things like pushing the pace or like slowing things down, checking the
Hmm.
clock. Like there's so many different things that kind of go into this that's super interesting. Which to me, like I guess tying it back to like StarCraft, like I love that StarCraft is kind of like this creative expression that people or players have where they're like, here's what I think the game is supposed to look like.
Hmm.
Let me try to go paint a picture of it
Yeah.
and see what happens, right?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I guess I've naturally been drawn to like in a weird way, StarCraft is one of them. Martial arts is another one.
Hmm.
Um, because I don't view myself necessarily as like a very creative person,
Mm.
but these are like very good outlets to like tickle the itch or scratch the itch to like be
Yeah.
creative.
Oh, that's so fascinating, man. And
That
I
was a
get
really
you.
long tangent, by the way. I don't know if
No, no,
any of
no,
that
no.
made sense or like was stupid or whatever, but
That
yeah, it's kind
that
of
was
like my brain
fantastic.
dump.
Yeah, I love it. I there were a couple times where I was like, okay, don't forget to say this, and then that would be your next point. So I'm like, zip the lips, just let them go, man. Um, yeah, no, I really really like that, and even the idea of okay, maybe one guy in the fight is the maestro, right, and the dude he's fighting
Mhm,
is just like I'm just straight brute power, right?
mhm,
But it's not like that brute power person is not expressing themselves. They just have a really simple idea that they believe in a lot, right?
mhm,
It's just less intricate. And in a way, it's almost like you kind of need that person as a counterpoint to the other, to the really complicated like maestro, let me dance around you, let me play with these different levers, like and I love that, right? And we definitely have that in StarCraft as well. Like there's sort of the I'm just really, really, really good at making workers, not getting supply blocked, scouting you properly, having the right unit composition, having my stuff positioned in the right way.
Mhm.
splitting the right number of stalkers off for the 3 different drops that you're doing, and just different things like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we've always had players like that. Like in every era of StarCraft that has existed. And then there's also other stuff, right? And I
Mhm.
have like I love that you made this point, because I feel like it is one of the coolest things about StarCraft, and also lots of other stuff, right? Um
Yeah. Yeah. You can see like examples of this like in so many different categories, right?
mhm,
Like the brute strength guy or the simple idea person who's damn good at the thing that they do. Like
mhm,
let's not undersell them. And then the person who is trying to think of every mind game or level that this game could theoretically be pushed towards. And when they interact, it's not always clear like, hey, this person's always going to beat that person or vice
mhm,
versa, right?
mhm,
Um, it's kind of like, hey, if you can't execute the fundamental things of this game, it doesn't matter like how complex your ideas are or how much you think you know about this game,
right.
right? Because StarCraft demands like execution that's super good. So
Mhm,
like, you can't like, you can't go into a fight being like, oh, I know all of the different combinations that you could throw, like jabs and one
mhm.
twos, and do this and that. But if you don't know how to like, if you don't have the cardio to go like 10 rounds,
Ah,
all
yep.
that goes out the door. Like it doesn't
Mhm,
matter,
mhm.
right? And the same in StarCraft. Like if you get supply blocked all the time, or like you're floating a ton of minerals, like all of your great ideas, like they can't express themselves in the way that you think they
Right.
can.
Mhm,
Um, which that's I think the thing that people really like about StarCraft, because like the people who are like you described are more simple minded. They macro 80 workers, take all the bases, deflect the
mhm,
blocks, get a huge army. Like there's something really um like impressive about those people,
mhm,
because they have a plan and they're executing it against all the things that could come their way,
mhm.
right? They're not playing mind games. They're just like, I'm going to do the thing, and when I get to the place that I'm trying to get to,
Mhm.
it's going to be a victory. So like they've determined the win condition for them. They
Right.
know it. It's clear. It's right over there. I'm going to go
Yeah.
get it. Right. Whereas the person who's like thinking or changing or adjusting their plans on the fly, maybe their win condition is changing over time, and they're
Mhm,
like, oh, here's the moment where I now like have to turn this on, or the if then statement that they make
mhm.
leads to all of these other things that they're constantly like processing, and that's
Right.
beautiful in its own respect. But like, it's not clear that that person beats this person.
Totally, yeah. And what's so
Yeah.
fascinating is like this dynamic that you're talking about, where it's like, maybe one person is like doing a lot of thinking, right, to try to earn their victory, whereas the other person, like, I'm just stronger than you, kind of, or I'm just faster, or whatever it is. It's so fascinating to me that that dynamic exists in StarCraft, and it also exists in martial arts, right? Like,
Mm.
and you would totally, if you were a layperson and didn't know anything about either one, you'd look at it and be like, well, obviously martial arts is about like how hard you can smack somebody, and StarCraft is about how good your brain is. And it's no, you're so missing the point. Like
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
spectrum of how you can beat people exists in both mediums. And yes, one medium is more physical and one medium is more mental, but like it's the same, man. Like it's just so interesting.
You said it better than I can. I 1,000% agree with all that. Like, there's a Day Nine thing from a long time ago where he's like trying to describe StarCraft to the layman, and he's like,
Yeah.
people think StarCraft is strategy, and he's like, no, it is the RT part of strategy of RTS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like RT probably accounts. I'm going to butcher what he said, but probably accounts for like the vast majority of
Mm,
what the actual game is. It's just the real time thing,
mm-hmm.
and how well you operate within the real time,
Mm-hmm.
how many things you can do, then determine all of the things that you can unlock in the strategy portion of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to even get to scrape into or dig into the strategy part, it's almost like an earned right. It's like a rite of passage. You have to know
Ah.
the real time stuff in order to get to the strategy
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like doing a proxy hatch in Bronze League is not going to. It's fun,
Sure. Yeah.
but you're not going to like be making expert tutorials on like how to do this, because like
Mm-hmm.
strategically it doesn't make sense if your real time execution doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I fully agree with you. I think that there's so many different mediums that this can kind of exist on.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Sorry, I just see Boom in chat unhappy with us. Boom
Shout
has
out
been
Boom.
proxy
Hi
hatching quite a
Boom.
bit lately.
I
um,
think
so
Boom went on a run. I think I saw a tweet or something. Boom was like, I think I don't know, like a 10-game win streak,
yeah,
strictly proxy hatching.
unreal.
Mad respect.
Um, so reeling it back to, streamer stuff and, specifically the subject of you, right?
Hmm.
We talked a little bit ago about, how you like that sort of, underdog characters in fighting games, or, oh, this strategy's bad, you can't win with it. And you're like, oh yeah, I can't. Like, let me show you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Do you feel like that is a thing you gravitated towards as a streamer, or is that just like your soul? It sounds like, you were doing this even in Smash.
Uh, I don't know. Streaming to me is, I like kind of stumbled into it.
Mm,
Like,
mm-hmm,
I didn't come into streaming and be like, I want to be a streamer. I want to broadcast my game to thousands of people.
mm-hmm.
I like, so, okay, I'll give you like a little backstory. Like,
Yeah.
uh, 3 years ago, I had kind of been on a Starcraft hiatus. I wasn't playing the game, and like,
Mm-hmm,
one of my buddies who like I met through Starcraft, like in one of the original lands that I went to. Um, his name is Ryan. He had just started getting back into the game and streaming,
mm-hmm.
and you know, I remember like getting pinged. I don't know if we were using Discord at the time, probably something else. I remember getting pinged by one of his other friends. Like, oh, hey, Ryan's streaming Starcraft. We should go check him out. It's like, oh, cool. Like, well,
Yeah.
I'll go watch. And then I remember watching him and like, watching him make some plays and like doing cool things. And I'm like, I forgot how fun this was. Like, I
Mm,
want to do that.
yeah.
Right. And not only do I want to do that, I want video evidence of myself having done that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to create a highlight reel. I want to like do a thing and then have it like digitally etched into the history book. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care. Like that's the reason I wanted to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I got a shitty webcam on my shitty computer. If you look at like some of my old VODs, like the webcam's like literally on my desk pointing upwards at my face. It's like the worst freaking
Nice.
angle. There's like a lamp in the background and like the production quality is just like absolute ass. Um and I remember like going back just so I can watch my VODs and be like, hey, this is cool. I remember this game and like kind of tooting my own horn of like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I wrecked this guy. Like that was awesome. And like that's literally the reason I got into StarCraft streaming was just to like record or have evidence of stuff that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in a weird way, it's like, oh, fast forward to today, I'm like watching YouTube videos on like, hey, how do you video edit this in DaVinci Resolve to do this or that? And all I'm thinking is like, how the hell did I get like what
Right.
happened? And it's kind of like one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, led to
Mm-hmm.
another. I'm not like, oh, I want to be like a StarCraft community person and broadcast my game to like thousands of people. Like that was never the goal.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's kind of a weird, and maybe you've experienced this too, right?
That's
Like,
that's why I'm laughing.
and
Yeah.
it's funny. It's like I'm downloading software. I didn't care. I was like, I never wanted to be a video editor. Let's
Yep.
be real. Like that was never an area of interest for me.
Mm-hmm.
But in like playing the game and having all these raw unedited VODs, like, oh, maybe I should house them somewhere. Oh, like what about YouTube? Okay, let's put them there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like they look like shit. I don't want to represent myself that way. Let me try to like add like a thumbnail or like
Mm.
try to edit some transitions and things like that. Wait, how do I do that? Like you start asking yourself all these questions and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I need an overlay. Like, what the hell is an overlay? I
Yep.
should get a green screen. Like, it was never like, I'm gonna be a streamer. Let me put down like $4,000 to buy all the gear and like
Mm-hmm.
make the thing. It was just like one thing led to another, and um, here I am at like 2 a.m. editing YouTube videos, and that kind of that's kind of where it led to. It's weird.
Yeah.
Weird. Here I am talking to you on like a community interview setting.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. Like I am over here giggling because I resonate with it so much. Like, and I even did start out a little bit like, okay, kind of the same conceit as you. Like, I want to have a record of this, right? And with me, it was a little different because I'm like, oh, I'm bronze, and I know that streaming StarCraft is a cool thing now that people do, and I like it, and I like watching it. And like, what if I started streaming when I was bronze? And like, but like the difference between your story and mine is I was like, oh, and I'm gonna like start with like a good quality, right? And I totally didn't at all. It was so shit, right? Like, um, but even like setting out to do it that way, we're like, I'm gonna have like a good startup, right? it has been exactly what you just described, right? It's one thing after another after another. Like, I didn't think I would care about lighting for cameras or audio engineering or how to composite shit together for a live broadcast or how to be good on-air talent or how to moderate against problematic chat behavior. Like, the list goes on and on and on and on, and people in chat are,
The MCA laws. I'm like, what the fuck am I reading about?
yeah,
Like, this is crazy to
yeah,
me.
I'm
Like,
like,
why?
yeah,
How did I get here?
right, yeah,
It's like a guy who ends up in jail after like making a series of many bad mistakes, and it like goes back to that marijuana commercial where he's like, I should have never done. Like
right, yeah.
it hit just like the thing just snowballed so far down the rabbit
Mhm.
hole, and yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy to think about.
It's funny, like I love it because like most of these interviews have been with other sort of community like streamer type people, and there's a bunch of them in chat too, all sounding off like, yep, I feel that. And what's so interesting to me about it is there's got to be something like I don't. Okay, you could totally argue about this, and I'm curious to hear your take. I almost hope that you fall on the other side of the argument so we could battle about it for a second. But you could take the position that like the art form itself of streaming does this to you, right? It like kind of forces you to learn all of these. It's like I use the term like Renaissance person, right? Where it's like I'm going to be a little bit knowledgeable about everything. Um, I personally kind of don't buy that. It feels more to me like, not every streamer, but there's like a good percentage where it's like if you're this shape of person, somehow or another you gravitate towards streaming. And it's like maybe just the fact that like someone like you or me or the people in chat, like you're willing to be like, okay, I'll learn a little bit of video editing. Sure, what could it hurt? Like what do you think on this one?
Huh, that's a really good question. Um, so wait, if I'm understanding the question, you're asking like folks who become streamers were kind of all cut from the same cloth, right? Like,
In a way,
is that
yeah.
is that the suggestion? You're like,
Uh-huh.
hey, maybe there's some underlying creativity or curiosity that attracts the type of people like me or you or the folks in chat or whatnot.
That's the narrative I want to sell because I want to believe it. I think it's fun. But I kind of hope you disagree with me so we can fight.
You know, you know, you know what? I do kind of disagree with that, and I'm
Okay.
not doing that just to fancy your debate. Like, I think I think the shared quality that streamers have,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the ones that we're all familiar with, is that there's like a there's like an inherent like grit that I
Mm.
think all of us share.
Uh-huh.
That streaming like is a very big commitment and hours game, and like
Mm. Yeah.
bringing energy to your broadcast. And by the way, you're playing a game that's really intense and hard to do. On
Yep.
top of that, um, that like a lot of people have tried it, right? Like a lot of people have dabbled into it.
Mm-hmm.
Streamed for a few months or like a couple weeks or a couple broadcasts or maybe one, and they didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the folks who like we've now become pretty familiar with, like you and I both, like they're probably mods in our chats, like those same
Mm-hmm.
people,
Right.
like these are folks who have done this for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to me, like that's probably the most shared quality I think that there
Yeah.
is. I think the curiosity thing, like I think some people have more than others. I wouldn't consider myself like super curious. I think I'm probably on the lower end of that spectrum in
Mm-hmm.
like the creative world. Um, I think there are folks who have like you know, hey, they've been streaming for like 6 months, but you've just watched their shit take off creatively, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Better overlays or different YouTube content, um, different guests on their streams or this or that. Like mine's been pretty simple. It's been pretty straightforward. Hey, play this game. I do this one thing and I do it pretty
Mm-hmm.
well. And I'm trying to stay true to like the reason I got into it is like, hey, document the cool stuff that's happening in this game,
Yeah.
and like just have it as a record. Like that's to me like if I stop streaming today, I'd be pretty happy. Like, hey, there's some stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that streaming necessarily pulls people in who are interested in learning or doing more. There's
Mm.
probably some of that. I also think streaming probably like I think most streamers probably have some sense of like narcissism. Like we want to hear our own voice and see our
Right.
face, or like for myself like get my own highlight reel like so I can like
Mm-hmm.
smile and laugh at it. Like I think that's probably like a shared quality with a lot of streamers. I don't think you would do that. I don't think you would like put yourself on camera and record all your
Mm.
stuff unless there's some sense of like narcissism or like hey, I want to see myself do a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that I set
That
this
was a
up
lot
like
there, by the way.
no, no, it's
So
great. It's great. Like, and I know that I set this up as I hope you disagree with me so we can battle, but parts
mm,
of what you said were too interesting for me to even bother, and I'd rather just dive more on some of the
let's
subjects that you raised actually.
let's go for
So you can have it. You can win.
it.
So okay, you started out and you're like, I want to make this highlight reel, right?
Mm.
And then you start getting deeper and deeper in. Now it's, a green screen. Okay, what about making my audio sound good? Or how can I, edit this and so on and so forth. Has the motivation kind of continuously through that arc, right? That journey, has it always been the highlight reel? Like, do you just want the highlight reel to be really, really good? Or are there other motivations that kind of crept in after you started streaming?
I guess it's evolved. Like I think it's changed over time. Like I think for
Mm-hmm.
one, oh, like it was like as simple as, oh, my webcam looks like shit. Like it's grainy. It's like 10 years old. It's like not great. Uh, why don't I just get okay, $70,
Mm-hmm.
fine. Like I'm spending so much time doing this hobby, doing this thing
Mm-hmm.
that it's like a negligible cost. Okay.
Sure.
Um, okay, there's a background, and maybe I don't want people like seeing the living room of my apartment at the time when I start streaming. Okay,
Yeah.
why not throw up a green screen? It might look cool. Let's
Mm-hmm.
figure that out. Um, oh, I'm using my headset mic when I first started streaming,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fine. It did the job, and I'm like, as I'm watching my own VODs, I'm like, it's picking up too much outside noise, or my
Mm.
voice sounds terrible, or all right, why don't I buy like the Blue Yeti? What is it like? I think it was like $100.
Mm-hmm.
It's an investment, right?
Sure.
But like I never went into it like I gotta go and get all the good stuff that streaming requires so that I can be a good streamer. It was,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm gonna like the quality of the content is the person doing the thing and the thing itself, and
Mm-hmm.
how well you and the thing interact, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of this other crap is like it's like the polish on your car, right? Like it's a little extra something. So like I don't think it like I ever went into it thinking like hey, I'm curious about making things better. It just kind of happened naturally over time.
Mm-hmm.
I also like didn't feel comfortable with like, hey, I'm gonna make a huge investment on all this stuff. Like I didn't know how long I was
Right.
gonna stream.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I could see myself like seeing the next cool thing and like going
Mm-hmm.
and doing that, right? Um, so yeah, it's just kind of it's been like one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of goals, for you, is it just about, is it more about improving as a player? Is it about like just enjoying the journey and it is what it is? Is it, do you want your stream to grow? Do you care? Do you want your stream to not grow?
You're asking a really important question that I think I've been asking myself, and I'll just be like
Ah,
totally straight with you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, I think there's a point in time where I'm like seeing the numbers growing and just getting addicted to like
Mm,
the danger of the social media like button, follow button, the
yep.
notification, this or that or whatever, and I'm like, it feels good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's probably some really smart like what is it called? Like I think the degree is like an HCI degree, like a human computer interaction
Ah, mm-hmm.
PhDs that are probably working for your Amazons and Instagrams and
Mm-hmm.
like have designed platforms socially that you get like a dopamine hit every time you see that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
follow, oh, somebody subscribed to me. Oh,
Oh
that
yeah.
like, and I found myself like chasing that a little bit and being
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, like let's do that more. And then you go down the rabbit hole that every Twitch streamer goes down of like, let me look at the viewer count. Oh, it's only this. Oh, but yesterday it was, and like
Yeah.
it was making me feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. Um, and so I've been trying to like actively adjust that view, um, and think, okay, well, let's return to why we did this in the first place. Like, does this bring me satisfaction to play
Mm-hmm.
this game and have some highlights and do cool things on it? And oh, hey, by the way, if I make some friends along the way and meet some people in the community, cool. Like, hey, that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Those things have happened. So do I want to grow my stream? I guess only in the interest of, you know, doing it for the reasons that I want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
selfishly. I'm
Right.
not looking at this like, hey, this is a career endeavor. I think some folks have the ambitious goal of like, I want to do this, and like the folks who have managed to like really become successful streaming,
Mhm.
you got it. I don't even know like the sweat equity that went into that. Like I watch
Yep.
like the Up Trees or the Neuros of the world. Like holy shit,
Yep.
they did a lot to get to
Mhm.
where they were. Like that
Yeah.
that did not come easy. And people think, oh, like it's only because they were first on the platform or this or that. You can make
No.
those content. No way.
Yeah.
No freaking way. Um, like I don't think I can do that.
Mhm.
That is a different type of approach
Mhm.
that I have a ton of respect for.
Yeah.
It's not the reason why I want to do this. It's
Mhm.
not the thing that I'm going to chase. So I think for me, I think the growth is more of a symptom than
Mm.
it is the objective.
Yeah.
Like it'll happen if what I'm doing is interesting to people, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't think I'm going to adjust like the thing that I'm doing in order to attract or
Yep.
interest more people. I think I want to do like I treat this more as a hobby than a like a growth career, like make this big or get more followers. Like I don't think I could do that. Is
Mhm.
kind of my long answer.
Yeah, no, totally. Totally makes sense. So, if it ever did blow up, would you treat it as an income source, or are you like fully anti that? Like if you had money coming in like wild, tomorrow, and you
I
you
think it.
felt, like if you felt confident, I guess, that it was like economically the right play, would you do it, or would you not have interest in
Well, let me ask you a clarifying question. Like,
that?
what
Sure.
would economically viable look like? How would you
I
describe that?
Yeah, I guess we could define it in whatever way maybe makes the answer the most interesting, but I guess the way that I would think about it would be like, if somehow your stream grew to the point where you were looking at the amount of hours your day job costs you, right? And saying,
Yeah.
why the hell am I doing this? Why the hell am I spending time on this instead of the other kind of thing? If it ever got to that point, would you just lean into the streaming, or is it too like dicey for you that it could all kind of be gone tomorrow type of thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think while I still have a little bit of my youth left, I think I would try to ride out both as long as I could,
Yeah.
and like probably try to get it to a point where I'm like, hey, if I if I pursued streaming full time, is there a world where I can, if streaming fell apart tomorrow,
Mm.
where like what happens in
Yeah.
that scenario, right? So
Mhm.
I got to think about that like future. Um, Part of me says yes, like holy shit, that would be awesome. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I can just stream
Mhm.
full time. That would be really fun,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah.
thing to do. Um, the other part of me thinks like, okay, so that's actually a different scenario where money no longer is an issue. Like
Mm.
streaming, I guess the scenario is streaming your lifeline, right? Like,
Mm.
do you require this to like be, able to provide for your family, to like, reach financial goals, whatever,
Mhm.
right? Like, if it's your lifeline, I think inevitably it's going to affect your content, or at least my content.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and then streaming becomes more about like, what am I offering the world
Ah.
such that I can monetize it?
Mhm.
Whereas the way I'm treating streaming is like, here's my expression of creativity.
Mm.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. Whoever
Yeah,
likes
yeah,
it,
yeah.
cool. Like, fine.
Mhm.
If it's two people, if it's zero people watching, fine.
Mhm.
Um, I think your relationship with streaming or like any career
Mhm.
with your hobby or anything that you enjoy doing, your relationship with that thing is going to change if you rely on it for survival. Like
Mhm.
if you say, hey, financially, I need this thing to stay afloat or whatever. Um, I think there was a quote actually. The kid who plays Joffrey in Game of Thrones, I think he had actually after that show,
Mhm.
he had stopped acting. Like he had just kind of left
Really?
the scene,
Hmm.
right? I don't know if it was like a permanent thing or whatever. Like I think he went to school or whatever. And I recall some kind of version of this quote where he's like, "Hey, you know, your relationship with your passion changes when you rely on it for
Ah.
your income,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how you treat it is going to be different too." So, like, if I relied on streaming for like my income, I would absolutely be like, how do I grow it? How do I get more followers? How do I get
Mm,
more subs? How do I put more content? Where else can I push that content? What other
yeah.
platforms are there? Am I streaming on the right platform? And like asking myself all of these questions that quite frankly, like I don't have to ask myself today. So
Mhm, mhm,
this is my super long answer for your question of like, would I drop everything if it became financially viable? I think I'm leaning towards no, because
mm,
I don't know that I would enjoy it as much.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what about the subject of sort of, ladder improvement and grinding? Like, do you have a certain thing that you want to hit where, like, if you don't hit it before, they turn the server off in 2080, you're going to cry? Or
No,
does it not matter? No?
no, it doesn't matter. I think there was times where I'm like, hey, I want to be a multi-time GM and this or that.
Mm
Um, I think I'm too old for that now. That's probably wrong. That's a stupid idea to put out there. Um, I I think the juice is not worth the squeeze.
hmm.
Like in
Mm,
order to be good in the competitive environment that's out there today,
mm-hmm.
the amount of time I at least for somebody at my skill level to put in to get there,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be like I- it's going to be too high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think for folks who might be picking up the game who are maybe still in like the impressionable learning part of their brain,
Mm,
it's probably more reasonable for them to be able to get it than for somebody who's like, I have habits and those habits
mm-hmm.
are like very difficult to break.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I don't have like player goals. I don't have like a get to here or get to there.
Mm.
Um, I hate losing when I play.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
it gives me a bad feeling.
Uh huh.
But I'm not treating like each game as like a part of a much bigger picture goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've kind of looked at it as, hey, here's an activity that I do
Mm-hmm.
that I'm decent at, that I'm going to broadcast and try to just leave it at that.
Yeah. It's just art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super cool, man.
Learning is going to happen all along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to learn and like try to improve on stuff, but not with the intention or like putting the landmark in the ground and saying I have to get to that part of the
Right.
growth. Um, yeah, it's just it makes the game a lot more enjoyable, I think.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that comes through in your content too, that you are just kind of like you're jamming games and just sort of vibing, which is like a really nice feel for a stream, I think.
Thank you. um, yeah, I think I've also like tried the learn hard and try to write down the things that I'm doing. I used to have a
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet of like all
Yeah.
of the games that I played and like who I played against,
Mm-hmm.
what this
Mm-hmm.
was, and what I came to find was like this number one, I'm not like digging into that enough that
Mm.
it's going to make me better.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like 100% on me. But also I like ask myself, hey, do I really care about like getting better that much?
Mm.
And like,
Mm-hmm.
is it worth like how much I need to do to get better?
Yeah.
I kind of reference like Vibe. Like he used to
Mm-hmm.
be a pro player. He used to
Mm-hmm.
be really freaking good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's still really freaking good,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't have the I gotta win GSL next year goal
Mm-hmm.
in his brain. And you get to see a comfortable person just playing the game and
Mm-hmm.
enjoying it. Like I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's what my stream and content had just kind of become over
Mm-hmm.
time.
It's so funny. Like you mentioned the spreadsheet, and as soon as you said that, I remember when you were doing that. Now, like I remember watching, and hanging out for some of those streams. And it's so funny because the energy that I was talking about before, where it's like you're just there and you're doing your thing, even
Mhm.
then, even when you were in spreadsheet mode, I remember that same energy. And it's like, I don't even know what my point is here, other than I think that that's fascinating that still came through.
Well, every like StarCraft player goes through this, right? Where you're like,
Mm,
there's a shitload of like negative emotional feels in this
mm-hmm.
game.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why we enjoy the game is because of how brutally honest the game is with us.
Yep.
And if you can stomach some of the bad feeling, then like, hey, maybe you'll find some satisfaction in this game. And like, when they talk a lot about like flow state and like getting into rhythm or like the
Mm-hmm.
zone and like um, I did a little bit of like reading on like, okay, well, what is flow state exactly,
Mm,
right? How do we achieve it? Why is it important? What is it exactly? Does
yeah.
everybody experience it, right? Like all of these kind of questions came up, and I'm like, I feel like I've felt that playing StarCraft.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I never got food blocked. My minerals never got over 500. I was taking bait, like, and then when you're playing the game, like everything just kind of slows down, and then you can tell when you're in the zone versus
Mm-hmm.
not in the zone,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like oh, like it's just my game to lose. Like it's all up to me.
Mm,
And
mhm.
you kind of get yourself into that mindset. Um, like the there's like a I think tell me if you know about more about this than
Yeah.
I do, but like I think there's like a extremely big emotional reward when
Mm,
you get into a good zone or a good flow state.
mhm.
And
I
like maybe that's the thing that we're all chasing when we play this game.
I don't know more than you about this, and I wish I did know more about it in general. More about it than I do. Um, I would even go further than what you said, and go so far as to say, like, I have talked to a lot of people. This is a thing of mine. Where if I'm like at a drinks, after hour or whatever party, and you get chatting to somebody, like, I always would rather talk to them about whatever they think is like really cool, right? Like, so, we got into like martial arts earlier, and it's like, yeah, let me just like listen to you talk about that, right?
Yeah.
To me, I feel like everybody is chasing that same thing you just described in whatever mediums. Like, I had a boss who used to talk about, he would do like autocross racing with cars, right? Exact same shit that you just talked about, where it's like, I'm looking for that like little quiet inner mental state thing, where everything kind of is slowed down and I'm just like operating now.
Uh-huh.
I've talked to people like, runners, just, I mean, you name it, right? It's like
Mhm.
almost everybody is looking for that thing, and it's what gets them so hooked on whatever their interest is. And it's like kind of funny actually, now that I say that, because like, okay, well, if you can get it from anything, why are we all so hooked into like our thing,
Mhm. Mhm. I I think the thing that you wind up gravitating towards, it probably found you, maybe
Mm,
in a lot of
mhm, mhm.
cases. It's just whatever by circumstance, like, oh, I needed a way to socialize when I was in school, and so here's the 5 clubs that were available. I wound up going to
Uh-huh.
that, and that became the thing that I got tied to. But I think you're right. Like, I think there's like a real like chasing of doing something difficult really well.
Mm, mhm.
Because I think that actually gives people a lot of like emotional satisfaction.
Yep.
Um, and it's hard to find. Like it's hard to do that.
Mhm.
And some people who have jobs that they can do in their sleep, you don't accomplish that in your job, right?
Yep.
And it's also a little bit different too when you're doing it for somebody else, right? When you're working for an employer, like
Mhm.
your work and it's kind of an exchange. They pay you for your work and you do it. Reaching that like Zen kind of flow state thing is, I think, a little bit more difficult in that
Mm.
environment.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas if it's like, oh, hey, I'm playing Starcraft and I'm just doing it for myself,
Mhm.
kind of reaching that state, it's just all up to you.
Yeah.
But I think there is definitely like I remember reading this somewhere. I think like uh, the flow state comes from a like it's like the intersection of like high skill or high
Mhm.
perceived skill
Yep.
and
Perceived
what was the
difficulty.
yes, high perceived challenge. Yeah,
Mhm.
perceived difficulty. Exactly.
Yeah.
And okay, StarCraft is that. Like
Uh-huh.
it's fucking hard, right? Um, so yeah, it that to me is like, now that I'm like breaking this down, and thank you by the way for like getting me here. But like now that I'm
For
breaking this
sure.
down, I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
why have I played this game for 10 fucking years? Like, oh, I get it. Like, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
makes a lot
yeah.
of sense. Yeah.
Super cool. Another thing that you mentioned, and we've kind of brushed up against this a couple times, so we haven't like explicitly gone there, is this idea of, the constraints that you have as like a working professional who, you do this as a hobby, you do it because you love it, you do it because you want this highlight reel, you want to have this artistic expression. How do you kind of make it fit, right? Because I know for me, when I hit the go live button, I'm like, I'm gonna do this forever. It's you get locked in. You're just like, I gotta go. And then you're like, oh shit, I have to work tomorrow. Like, I
Yeah.
actually can't just like stream for 9 hours because I got that huge raid kind of thing. Like,
Mhm.
how do you make that work?
Well, for anyone in my community, the recent answer is I haven't. Um, I've streamed a handful of times this past couple months.
Hmm,
Like I've
hmm.
been pretty MIA. So like the short answer is I haven't.
Sure.
I think so like in the early going when I first started doing it, I was really excited to do it,
Mm,
and like it became part of like my daily routine. I've also like thankfully I'm really lucky in this respect. Like I work in tech, and tech companies tend to be a lot more flexible with
Mm,
respect to like you can work remotely,
yep.
flexibly here and there or whatnot, and they're not. It's not like a clock watching kind of environment. All the places
Mhm.
that I've worked, so like I have that kind of going for me. Um, uh, so I managed to like do it for a good bit. I think lately I've been a little bit stream burnt out, if I'm being
Mm.
honest.
Yeah, sure.
I think it happens to a lot of people. And I'll like be honest with myself of like, yeah, why don't I just take a little bit of time off?
Mhm.
Come back when I'm ready.
Right,
It
yeah.
is a hobby after all.
Mhm.
It would be different, I think, if it was like, hey, I need to do this to like pay the bills and do all that. Thankfully, that's not the case for me. Um, so yeah, I think it's a matter of like juggling your priorities, and I think you do a really great job, by the way. I'm gonna switch gears on you. I think you do a really good job like coming in with a plan of like, here's what I'm gonna do,
Mm.
here's the content that I want to create today. I've never been as intentional, I think, as you are. I'm like, hit the ladder button, hit the go live button, and then jam away for like 2 hours, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of been the way I've approached it. Like,
Mhm.
take breaks when you need it,
Yeah.
do it when you feel compelled. Um, the beginning was a lot more of a grind than it is now,
Mhm.
but I feel like it's like come to a good place.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words in the middle of that.
I
Definitely
mean,
appreciated. Like,
I think your community and your growth kind of speaks for itself. Like
oh man, thank you.
I I've kind of like I think a lot of us streamers, like the ones that have started around the same kind of time frame,
Mhm.
like in a way we're all kind of tied together, right?
Mhm.
Like, hey, we've all kind of grown our communities, and quite frankly, 70% of our communities are probably all the same people.
Yep.
And hey, look, it's cool to have watched all of us kind of grow.
Mhm.
It's almost like you're all part of the same frat or something. Like, hey, we
Yeah.
all we all did this together. We were in the trenches and stared at that zero viewer button for hours and didn't and had the resolve enough to turn it on the next day again.
Mhm.
Like that's tough. That's
Yeah.
really hard.
Right.
So I mean, shout out to all the other like streamers who uh, have kind of made it on kind of the same energy I think that we did.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's really fun, and that's I think it's so funny. Like, when the idea of me doing these interviews first came out, it was like, well, okay, like I'm injured right now. I gotta do something. I want to do something cool. And then I start thinking, oh, there's like I'm friends with a lot of really cool people, and they haven't done interviews, right? Like, oh, it'd be so neat to do like a series, right? And I was thinking of it in that same way as you, where um in a lot of these instances, like, and not everybody, right? I interviewed Upper Tree, who's been doing it since the freaking dawn of time, and he's, very much an influence of mine and stuff. But, a lot of the people who I spoke to and said, hey, you want to do one? It's right around that same timeline, like you're saying.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is so fun to kind of like look to your left side, look to your right side, and it's like everybody's kind of doing it together. We're all, like learning the lessons, right? We're all okay. There's a point where we all got green screens. There's a point where we all like improved lighting, just different stuff like that. And yeah, it's a really fun sense of community. And it's neat to get to hear the stories too. Like, you shared some of the things that have been like recurring themes of like the journey of the streamer, right? And the that moment where you start staring at the view count a little too much. Like, a bunch of people have mentioned that as well.
Yep.
Um
Yep. Find me the streamer that doesn't do that,
yeah.
and like I'll give you $100 or something. Like it's an inevitability, right?
Yeah.
Like you do it and you're gonna look. But yeah, I like fondly remember the days. I was actually chatting with I played a couple of games of Starcraft off stream
Mhm.
yesterday. I was chatting with Glazerbeam.
Yeah.
Shout out Glazerbeam wherever you are. Uh, and I think he said something along the lines of, "Dude, it was awesome. Like the early days of streaming. Like he always had like a daytime schedule, and I always
Uh-huh.
had like the evening schedule. And then I would always like troll around his chat, and then he'd come troll around my chat. And we'd
Mhm.
probably started streaming like within the same month or so range of each other,
Mhm.
and I've gotten to watch like both of our streams kind of grow.
Yeah.
Which is like you don't get. It's like a weird thing to like get a sense of camaraderie that way with like
Mhm.
number one people you haven't met in person, number two people who are on this like weird streaming, very niche like StarCraft 2 streaming on Twitch journey. It's
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
there's just only a handful of people who like done that,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's nice too, like, the like you say, kind of the sense of camaraderie, right? Where it's, you and Glazer aren't looking at each other like, oh, that asshole got that many views. I got it. Like it's just never been that, right? It's always been, at least that's my perception. Like maybe somewhere out there, somebody's got beef with somebody, but like it's mostly not that.
That's right. I think that's also right that there's probably people out there who are like, "Oh fuck that guy, he's got more viewers than me." That's got to exist to some degree. But
Right.
I maybe, and tell me if I'm like going out on a limb by saying this, but like I think there's something about the fact that StarCraft is more of a niche game these days.
Mm.
The community is much
Mm-hmm.
smaller, but much tighter,
Mm-hmm.
and the history of this game and the community is much deeper and richer than most others. It's been around
Right.
for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's an inevitability. I think that kind of ties people together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also like hey, this thing is really hard. We both participate in this thing that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have a lot of other respect for people who hit that ladder button and they just
Right.
grind the games and they do it, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure in a lot of ways like marathon runners love other marathon runners. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a
Sure.
marathon runner, but like they probably like, oh, you do that too. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you've been through.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And like going back to the whole narcissism thing, maybe it's like, hey, I see myself a little bit in you,
Mm.
or in you other screamers who've done this. I understand you, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
so like that, I think that kind of fuels some of that too.
Totally. Yeah. Man, you're giving me a lot to think about here. It's almost like I'm so tempted to get lulled into just like nerding out and chit chatting with you and like stopping interviewing, right? So I'm trying to like, okay, wait, hang on. I'm supposed to be like asking you stuff about
No,
you.
please do
Um,
that wherever you want to go. Like this is yeah, this is I'm having a lot of fun.
well, I mean, I told you, we would try to keep it to like an hour and a half ish. And I know I've taken you all over the place. I wanna maybe do some like just some fluffy like fun stuff because I feel like okay,
Heck,
one of the things that I wanted to showcase with you is like, just kind of who you are, what are you about, what motivates you. And I feel like we've covered a lot of that. And I've also shown like you're a really deep, introspective, thoughtful guy. And I wanted to make sure,
eh.
come on, man. Come on.
Next question.
Fair enough, fair enough. All right, YouTube, I rammed that through y'all's heads. All right. Um, but I want to do some of the, the fluffy, like just the fun questions, right? So you talked about, back in the day, right? I'm watching GSL. I'm watching DRG. I'm watching Lenok. I'm looking at this Muta play. I want to do that, right? What about between then and now? And it could be like modern era. It could be, early legacy. It could be late hots, like, whatever you want. Or maybe there are multiple answers. Like, who are the players that you're just like, yeah, that's like, that person, that guy, that gal?
This is sucks as an answer, but Cyril, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
he has pushed this game to a place that we didn't know was possible,
Mm-hmm.
and he dispelled the myth that to be good or the best at this game, you have to be Korean.
Mm.
I think it was exactly what the community needed. I think it was a really cool storyline to witness.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this random skinny dude from Finland is taking the world by storm.
Yeah.
Oh, but he won that, but there were no Koreans at that tournament. And then he wins this. Oh, but here's this other thing. And you win enough times, suddenly people run out of reasons why he's not the best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have been so impressed by. Impressed is like kind of an understatement, but like getting to see all of that, his run
Mm-hmm.
happen was to me like one of the coolest storylines of recent years of StarCraft 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people came back to the game because of the
Oh
fanfare
yeah.
that he was getting,
Uh-huh.
right? Watching him win tournaments and doing it in a way with Zerg that was there's okay, this sounds stupid, but there's nothing special about the way
Mm.
he did it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just excellence. Like
Yep.
the level of excellence of every facet of his play was just ever better than the person who's the best at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he in his at the Apex, he had collected all of the things and displayed it in the highest uh caliber competition with the
Mm.
highest level of pressure. Because
Mm-hmm.
like tournament play, like the pressure is like a whole nother thing that most of us don't understand. Like I would never
Right.
understand what it's like to play in the booth. And he managed to just do all of that and do it
Mm-hmm.
consistently, winning tournaments left and right. Like it's not
Yeah.
like, oh, I won one and then I disappear for like he was just doing it. Like
On. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you so seldom see that, I think, in a game as volatile as StarCraft. So like that to me has been like one of the best storylines.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know,
That's a cheesy
ESPN.
answer because it's easy to say Cyril, but like that it's true,
No, I
right?
mean, and you're right. It did a lot for the game. Like ESPN Esports Moment of the Year, right? Like, if that doesn't give you nerd chills, tasteless, like I don't, I don't even know if I want to talk to you. Like, and
Yes.
you can't argue that, it did something, right? Like there was an infusion of energy into the scene over that, where people were like, oh wait, you mean like South Korea doesn't have a monopoly on being good at this? Like, hold
Mhm.
on, I thought you needed a team house, and yeah, no, you
It
could be in your
it dispelled a
bedroom.
lot of myths, like
Mhm.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and I love the fact that StarCraft just as a game allows for somebody to get good. So like
Mm.
you're not relegated to hey like uh, whatever team house you're part of that's going to dictate your skill level.
Mhm.
Like Cyril basically proved like hey you can do this just on your own.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't understand the backstory well enough to say that with a lot of confidence, but like he didn't have like the ideal conditions that a lot of the
Sure.
other pro players have,
Right?
and yet he came out on top. You know.
Or the so-called ideal conditions, right? We
Mhm.
we all thought that, maybe we were wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, true, true. Maybe it calls into question like those conditions, right?
Mhm.
Maybe the team house isn't the thing that gets people really good. Maybe
Mhm.
it causes too much stress, or maybe that affects perform. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that to me has been like one of the favorite things to follow.
Mhm.
Um,
Totally.
yeah.
So, what about sort of scoping, outside of StarCraft? We talked about your interest in martial arts, but do you have other things that you're kind of into besides, SC2, and trying to hold down your day job, and interest in watching fights, and that kind of thing?
I mean, those are probably like the things that eat most of my hours.
Hmm.
Um, uh, hang out with my dog,
For sure.
hang
Yeah.
out with my girlfriend and my dog, and
Hmm.
uh, got the day job, do the StarCraft stream, try to hang out with my friends. Like that's that. I'm pretty simple. I think
Hmm.
outside of that, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's, holding down the day job, keeping the relationship healthy, keeping a pet healthy, and keeping a stream healthy is a lot. That's a ton to juggle, man, for sure.
yeah. I won't say I'm like perfect at any of those things, but like you try to find some like workable full balance,
Yeah,
right?
I feel you, man. It's all tough. I've got a
Yeah.
I've got a little puppy running around the house, so I'm especially feeling it right now. Yeah, let's see. Any other favorite players? Like, you talked about Cyril as like being hugely influential. Is there anybody else who you're just like, oh, I just like you, or I like your personality, or I like the builds you choose, or I like that one
Dude,
series you played?
I'm gonna maybe I'm gonna get a lot of hate for saying this, but I think like Life was the best like
Ooh,
player that
spicy.
I think I've ever seen
Mm-hmm.
in StarCraft 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we've still yet never seen the level of play that he demonstrated during that period of time.
Ooh. Okay,
Uh,
this is a spicy thread, because it gets into a thing that we could totally talk about, because you already talked about boxing, right? People love to do this
yeah,
specifically with boxing for whatever reason, and probably MMA too, although I don't know it as well. I
yeah,
grew up, my dad would always have like the pay-per-view like boxing stuff on at the time, as a little kid.
uh-huh.
Um People love to do the like, what if this guy was alive when that guy was alive, and they're both in their prime, and you battle them, right? So are you saying, Lamb and Rice, do I have you on record?
I'll say it. Yeah, I'll say it.
Oh boy.
I think he would be the best. I think if you put him in a time machine and brought him to any era of StarCraft 2, right, in the rich 11-year history, I think he comes out on top in every era. Like
Oh man.
I think, well, okay, so let's break this down, right? So if you transport him back to the beginning of StarCraft, th- nobody really knew what they were doing anyway. So like
Mhm.
it just by virtue of the legacy knowledge that those people created,
Mhm.
he would beat them because he's been blessed to have seen that template, right? So it's like
Mm.
hard to say like him against like the Nestees
Yeah.
who were more of the pioneers who needed to discover the game.
Mhm.
Like of course he would beat them because their discoveries informed his play,
Sure. Yeah. And you
right?
can't even imagine like, oh, let's mind wipe him, right? Because What does he
Right.
even look like without that? Yeah.
Yeah, he probably goes and plays soccer. He probably doesn't even go
Right.
play
Yeah.
soccer. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but if you think about, so all of those players, I'm already gonna say life is probably better than them. Probably would wipe the table with them in this hypothetical time chamber
Mm-hmm.
exercise.
Yeah.
Let's say we warped him to Legacy of the Void, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the past like 3 or 4 year era.
Mm.
Um, okay, clearly Cyril has been the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's a handful others who you know kind of come up in the discussion today too. But okay, let's break down why was life really good, right? What did he do spectacularly that separated him from the rest? This is very specific. I think it's his Zergling micro.
Mm.
I think he unlocked some weird like it's almost like he had a cheat code on
Mm.
about how well he controlled lings.
They did stuff better. Yeah, I remember. I remember watching it in person and being like, "What?"
I'm like, what? I'm like, don't make that decision. That's literally
Yeah.
bad. And he would dive in and go for stuff that
Mm-hmm.
should not work.
Yep.
And yet he was able to consistently produce results with them despite the widespread knowledge that this is bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? And since then, right, like since his time, we've never seen anyone do it the way
Mm.
that he's done it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm like trying to draw a sports parallel, and nothing's really coming to mind, but like
The best
he
I
was
got
able to,
is like the
yeah, go
Beyond
ahead.
Reapers before they nerfed it, right? The Beyond
Hmm.
Reapers were like people knew it could work that way because they watched it happen, and like
Yeah.
the meme everybody always says is like even Maru tried and couldn't, right? Like it
Hmm.
was just a different level of like being one with the unit kind of thing.
Yeah. It literally destroyed his hands. That's how good he was with it.
Mm.
Like there's like physical repercussions to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what he was able to find. Um, and yeah, you can kind of see it in like the way life controlled his lings. He was like mentally linked with
Mm.
the unit. That sounds so cheesy and stupid, but like he found like he was had like a deeper relationship with that thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody's been able to recreate that.
Yeah.
Cyril, for as good as he is, he's good in the big picture world. He's
Mm-hmm.
good at
Mm-hmm.
the everything part
Yeah.
of the game, right? Life, he was good at everything too, but here's where he spikes the most,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And I think, like, what's that quote? It's like, fear the man who knows not 10,000 kicks, but like the one who knows practice one kick 10,000 times or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that, he's that. And
Yeah.
he's really damn good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Lings have been a unit since literally the whole game has started,
Mm-hmm.
they've never been changed.
Right.
And he was able to find this thing with them in the literally the middle of the game's existence. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
did it before him, and still nobody's done it after him.
Mm-hmm.
That tells us something, right? Like to
Right.
me, he's like on a separate kind of stratosphere
Mm-hmm.
because of that. Um, like it unlocks so many different options. I think if you're as good as he is,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, rant over. So I'm off my soapbox. Like I think he would be the best.
Way cool. Way cool.
Yeah,
Okay, one more pet question if you have time for it. I know that
please
we're over. Okay.
do it.
Um the one thing that I did not talk about nearly enough is your sort of history as an actual competitor in tournaments, right? So I want to know, is there any one result that stands out to you either where it's like, yeah, that was like the best I ever played, or that was the hardest opponent I ever beat, or the biggest tournament I ever did well in, or just, anything like that that's like an iconic moment for you?
Um, okay, I think I mentioned Doro in
Mm-hmm.
2011. Uh, I'll have to show you. Maybe we do this offline at some point. Maybe I'll show it
Yeah,
on
yeah.
stream. But like, there's video footage of somebody, one of my friends behind me with like a crappy iPhone, filming the last part of Game 3 where he's GGing out, and
Mm-hmm.
then I stand up and I'm much younger at the time, and I'm like, holy shit, I think I just won.
Yeah.
Um, the tournament director or the guy running the tournament with his clipboard came up and he's like, oh hey, like what was the score? I'm like, oh, it's 2-1. And he's like, oh wow, you managed to take a game off of him. I'm like, oh no, I won. And he's like, wait a second, you won? That doesn't make any sense. Like, and that was their general response, and I don't
Yeah.
blame them. That's what I would say too.
Sure, yeah.
Uh, And that I mean, this was in like the one of the coolest eras of StarCraft. MLG was popping off, and people
Mhm.
were like flying in from Korea to come to these tournaments. It was just so cool. They like had a camera crew, and they like interviewed me after that game, and I was like,
Mhm.
dude, what the hell is happening right now? I never found that footage. They must not have published it anywhere, but
Mhm.
like that to me was like one of the coolest kind of
Yeah.
moments. And I was like a nobody. I'm still a nobody in the scene, like minuscule, right? Um, and I remember being in like we went out that night when I think Katz was there. And he's like, "Hey, I saw the end of your game versus Doro. Like that was freaking cool." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Dude, I just got
That's
blessed by Katz. Like
oh,
that guy
man.
is sick." You know? So
That's cool.
that's like a really like awesome memory for me. Um where I'll like never forget it. I talk about it and
Mhm.
feel like, dude, you're so lame. Like, stop talking about that. That was over a decade ago, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like still hanging on to it as like my claim to fame.
Mhm.
Um, so that one really stands out. This happened maybe like a- I want to say a year and a half or 2 years ago,
Mhm.
where I was up early one weekend on a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday or Saturday, and Wardy was running one of his tournaments,
Mhm.
and it's on EU server, and it's like, whatever. Why don't I throw my name in the hat and just play a couple games this morning?
Mhm.
So I had a cup of coffee and I just started playing, and I'm like, I hadn't been following the scene that much. I got matched up with this guy named Soul, and I was like, okay, like everybody is good. So I could click his portrait. Oh, I see his GM. Okay,
Mhm.
fine. Like that doesn't intimidate me or bother me too much. I didn't
Mhm.
know like how good of a player he was.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were doing like map bans, and I'm like, dude, it's been a while since I've even been in a tournament. Like, how does this work? Do I go first? Do you go first? Dude, I'm like such a noob when it comes to all that stuff, like
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
tournaments are actually run.
Yeah.
Um, and he's like, it doesn't matter. Just you pick the three maps. I'm like, I was like, what? Like, okay, I'm cool with that. Like,
Yeah.
more advantage for me, I guess. But
Sure.
I also thought like, hey, like that's kind of cocky. Like, who does
Uh-huh.
this guy think he is?
Right.
Needless to say, he's like freaking a really good player, one of the best Terrans in Europe.
Yeah.
I had Sarah was practice partner. Like, I had no idea,
Mhm.
right? I wound up beating him in a best of three, 2-1, off stream
Uh-huh.
with no evidence of that having existed,
Oh,
other than
you
I
didn't see
downloaded
it.
some replays that like they're in a folder somewhere because I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not deleting those. Like those have to live on somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember Wardy being like, "Wait, you beat Soul?" He's like, "That doesn't make sense." Uh, and then there was the I think it's OSC like bounty system out there where if you
Uh-huh.
beat like one of the top pros, they'll like PayPal you like $30 or something.
Oh, wow, huh.
And then I had submitted the replays to them, and then they PayPal'd me $30. And I was like, "Whoa, shit,
That's
it's real!"
cool.
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know this thing existed.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's the other one that like really stands out in my mind. Like both of those were really like kind of fun, cool
Mhm.
experiences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's back to that underdog thing. Don't tell Lamb and Rice the character or the unit or the strat is not good. Don't tell him he can't win.
I was by far like those are my A game. Like that was like you think about getting into flow state or catching
Mhm.
lightning in a bottle. Those were like it thankfully luckily happened in those moments. Where it's just the hands take over. I'm not thinking, I'm not doing anything. It's just play my game, do the things that I know I need to do, and then just see what happens. And then I realize like, hey, maybe the level's closer than I thought. Or
Mm.
when I'm in tippy top shape,
Yeah.
the gap is not as big
Mhm.
because there's a lot of things that go into these games. Maybe they're not on their A game, maybe they're tired, maybe they're looking past me or things like that.
Mhm.
And I think it just goes to show there's probably a lot of other StarCraft 2 people out there that have had that same experience where they beat
Mhm.
somebody they shouldn't have. And they'll probably say the same thing. They'll say, "Oh yeah, that guy's way better than me," but and then say exactly the same thing that I just said.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool.
So yeah, those are fun.
So, chat's probably going to jump on my case here if I don't ask this. And I'm not going to pressure you because I get it because I'm a streamer too, right? But I
Okay.
got to go there. When the time is right and life is calm enough and there's room, are we going to see some more Lemon Rice streams?
Yes, like undoubtedly yes. I feel really guilty. I haven't streamed uh at all. Like let's be real, in the last couple of weeks. Um, I feel like a sense of guilt. Tell me if this is valid or not. That I'm like, damn, I'm letting my community down by like not putting on games or like not being their evening entertainment that maybe they've come to get used to.
Mm,
So I wanna bring it back. Um, I want to do it when I have the energy and like
sure.
can put on the good games. I don't think I'd be doing people a service if I'm like feeling shitty or like
Totally.
tired or grumpy or like
Yep.
not feeling good. For what it's worth, I have been playing games off stream here and there, keep the hands feeling okay.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, we'll see more.
Yeah, and as far as is it valid, man, I get the guilt. I feel the guilt too, but also, I don't want you to feel the guilt. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We need you fresh, we need you happy. We don't need you, stretched too thin. So we're here when you're ready, man.
Hey, I'll be back.
And
Let's see
and
it.
chat is blowing up right now with people losing their minds. Can't wait to see another Lamb and
Dude.
Rice stream. So I think that you'll have some viewers waiting for you when the time comes.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm excited to come back.
Well, thank you once again, man. I know we took a lot of your time tonight. I
Dude,
really,
this
really
was so much
appreciate it.
fun. This was
Yeah,
so much fun. I
I'm
it
so
went
glad.
places I did not expect it to go,
Me
and
too.
I hey, for anybody else, I think out there that thought this was interesting or fun or is a streamer, like get on this interview. Like Eric's a just an awesome dude and like a cool streamer and like the conversation topics that he takes us, I think is just like, that's unique. So thank you for having
Oh, thank you so much, man. And let's spam some socials for you as well, and I'll get those on YouTube and stuff. Yeah, where can people find you? And I'll worry about pasting them for you.
me.
Don't.
Yeah, yeah. So at LambNRice, twitch.tv/LambNRice, on Twitter at LambNRice, on YouTube, LambNRice. Those are probably the three main places. Shamelessly, I think the YouTube plug is probably the best one. Like Twitter, I'm like
Mm-hmm.
semi-active. I'll like some things here and there, but I don't really post there much.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm not gonna lose sleep if I don't get followers there. But
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, YouTube, like I'm really proud of the last couple videos I created on there, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
shamelessly plug myself. It's like kind of uh, uh, my edited highlight reels of like I had like 2 years of just burrow baneling footage that I had clipped together and just finally made the reel that I've been talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, that's where people can find me.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, please, if you are, not paying attention, StarCraft viewer, dear viewer, if you've been living under a rock, please go fix it. Go follow him on all of these socials and content channels, and yeah, turn those freaking notifications on so that when the inaugural return stream happens, you're there. You don't want to be left out. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough.
All right, man. Anything
Fair
else
enough.
you wanna leave the people with, and then I'll hide you behind a BRB screen. I do this to every interviewee. I don't ever say like, okay, and then here's how we're gonna end it, and like you can like
Mm-mm-mm.
click.
Like, what's the outro
So
here?
I'll out myself like in front of you right now and everybody, and say also I'm sorry to everybody else who I interviewed before Lamb and Rice because I have done this to every single person. But anything else that you want to leave everybody with?
Big shout out to all the other StarCraft 2 streamers out there. You guys are doing God's work and like putting on the content. I'm behind the scenes, I'm lurking, I'm watching people streaming, so I just love to see it. So keep up the grind. And thanks again to you, man. Thanks for setting this all up. This is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It was great, man. And I'll see
Cool.
you soon.
All right.